Today we're going to look at counting atoms, and we're going to discuss a few examples that include coefficients, subscripts, and some will have parentheses in them. So in this first example, we see our formula has barium, sulfur, and oxygen. And if we look closely at it, we will notice that barium does not have a subscript, sulfur does not have a subscript, oxygen has a subscript of 4, and there is no coefficient. So because of that, barium is understood to be 1 because there's no subscript and I do not have a coefficient to multiply. Sulfur is also understood that it is 1, and oxygen would be 4. If I wanted to know the total number of atoms for this particular formula, I would just add 4 plus 1 plus 1, which equals 6. In our next formula, we still are working with barium, sulfur, and oxygen. We notice now that we have a coefficient. And so when we have a coefficient, it's telling me I have two sets of the main formula, BaSO4. So I'm going to multiply everything by 2. So barium still does not have a subscript, so it's understood that there is just one barium. So I would do 2 times 1, and that gives me a total of 2 bariums. For sulfur, sulfur does not have a subscript, so 2 times 1 equals 2. All I'm doing is multiplying through the formula. And then oxygen would be 2 times 4 equals 8. And if I wanted to know the total number of atoms in this formula, it would be 8 plus 2 equals 12. One thing that I've noticed as we've been working through counting atoms in formulas is that some of you are taking this 4 and you are applying it to other elements. This 4 only applies to the element that it directly follows. So it cannot apply to sulfur and it cannot apply to barium. The only element that that 4 goes with is oxygen. In our next example, now we see that we have parentheses. We still have barium, sulfur, and oxygen. We do not have a coefficient to multiply by, but we do have these parentheses, and we see that the subscript is now on the outside of the parentheses. That means that this 4 is going to apply to the oxygen and the sulfur, but it will not apply to barium since barium is not inside of the parentheses. So to count atoms here, barium does not have a subscript, there is no coefficient, so it is understood that barium is just 1. Sulfur does not have a subscript that immediately follows it, so it is understood that it is just 1, but I need to multiply it by the 4 outside of the parentheses, so 1 times 4 equals 4. Oxygen is the same. It does not have a subscript directly following it, so it's understood 1. 1 times 4 equals 4. If I want to know total number of atoms in this particular formula, I would add 4 plus 4 plus 1 equals 9. In our next formula, we now have a coefficient and we have parentheses. So I'm going to take this coefficient and I'm going to multiply it all the way through the formula. So for barium, it would be 2 times 1 equals 2. I'm not going to multiply barium by the 4 because barium is not within the parentheses. Sulfur, however, is inside the parentheses, so I'm going to multiply 2 times 1 because sulfur does not have its own subscript. But then I need to multiply it outside of the parentheses, so 2 times 4 equals 8. I would do the same thing for oxygen, 2 times 1, and then that's going to give me 2 times 4 equals 8. If I want to know the total number of atoms in this particular formula, I would add 8 plus 8 plus 2, which equals 18. In our last formula, it looks very similar to the last one that we just did, but now oxygen has its own subscript, in addition to the subscript that's outside of the parentheses. So we're going to do this exactly how we did the last formula. For barium, it is just 2 times 1. Sulfur is going to be 2 times 1 times 4. Oxygen is going to be 2 times 2, which equals 4. And then I have to multiply it out by that 4. So 4 times 4 equals 16. And if I want to find the total number of atoms, I would add 2 plus 8, which is 10, and then 10 plus 16, which is 26. If you have any questions, let me know.